Hey there, welcome back to another review, this time of the 1983 science fiction fantasy film, Krull. Now, Krull is a 1983 film, pretty much released to kind of cash in on Star Wars. It was actually released at the wrong time because, if I remember correctly, it was actually competing with Return of the Jedi, and it didn't stand a chance in hell of beating that juggernaut. Krull is a film that's directed by Peter Yates. It's based on a screenplay by Stanford Sherman. It features a cast that's comprised of Ken Marshall, Lysette Anthony, Freddie Jones, David Battley, Bernard Bresslaw, Alun Armstrong, Liam Neeson, Robbie Coltrane, who would go on to play Hagrid in the Harry Potter films. And you have a few other actors like John Welsh, Graham McGrath, and you also have Francesca Annis, who has a little bit role in this as the Widow of the Web. Now, she's been in other films. She was in Dune, and she's been in a few other fantasy films, uh, kind of like Krull. Now, actress Lindsay Krause actually dubbed Lysette Anthony for the voice of Princess Lissa, because for some reason the producers for this movie thought that, well, in order to make the film appeal to a wider audience, we can't have the princess be voiced by a British actress. We can't have her have a British accent. We have to have this princess have an American accent. It didn't matter because the movie didn't do that well in the box office. So it was a pointless bit of dubbing. Now, the film also features a splendid, spectacular score by James Horner, one of my all-time favorites of his, and it's also edited by Ray Lovejoy. Features cinematography by Peter Sushinsky, and also the film has a budget of $47 million. I've also heard 43 million. So at the time, it was one of the biggest films to date in terms of budget. And it's on the screen. They shoot it. They shoot the film on location. This is the type of film you don't see nowadays anymore that I miss. They actually go on location, shoot on real mountainsides. They shoot in real locations. This was shot on the really popular, really famous Pinewood Studios. It was shot on the 007 soundstage. There were like 40. There were multiple different sets that were built for this film. It was one of the most expensive films of its time. 23 sets were built for Krull, covering 10 sound stages at Pinewood Studios, London. So the money was at least on the screen when it comes to this film. Now, Krull has a pretty straightforward plot. It's a lot like your typical sort of fantasy film where you have your hero, this time Prince Colwyn, played by um, Ken Marshall, who really didn't do a lot after this, and I think it's too bad because I actually liked him. I thought there was kind of a Mark Hamill sort of vibe he gave to me. This is kind of fish out of water type character. He had this kind. He had this kind of happy-go-lucky kind of vibe. He was obviously a younger guy, and so it was a hero who wasn't old and wise. He was impulsive, and he was put in a situation that he really did not know how to handle right away. So he was learning on the fly while he was trying to rescue his princess, rescue the love of his life, and also save his kingdom. Now, so you have Ken Marshall's character Colwyn and Lysette Anthony's character Princess Lissa. They are from two different kingdoms who decide to eventually unite together via marriage to combine the two kingdoms and their forces in order to defeat the beast, which is literally a beast. It's a monster. It's a really freaky looking monster too. It's a guy in a suit. He's got it's done practically. He has these like really disturbing looking red eyes with black pupils, all long sharp teeth, uh, long fingers with claws and stuff, and he's very powerful. And I love how the beast in this is a beast. It's not a metaphor for some guy or some regular human who's called the beast because he's so brutal. But it's actually really a monster. I also love how his fortress, the Black Fortress, is essentially a it's a spaceship. In the beginning of the film, you see it flying in space and essentially landing on this planet Krull. And then the beast sends his forces, his warriors called Slayers, to pretty much take over the kingdom. And he does this with like every single planet that he lands on. He overtakes them. He takes them over. It's kind of like the Independence Day aliens. Lands and he harvests everything and then flies off to some other planet and does the same thing. So it's just one of those things where he just uses these planets and abuses them and takes everything away from them and just pretty much just uses them to uh, gain resources and to pretty much just fuck everything up because it's pretty simple and straightforward. It's not really established what the Beast's plan is. It's just the Beast is here, he's wreaking havoc, and he's not going to leave unless somebody stops him. So uh Lissa and Colwyn are to be married. They're married at a ceremony, but then the Slayers come in and they crash the wedding. And they kill off a bunch of the people, and even including Colwyn's father. And they kidnap the princess. And the only survivor is Colwyn. Colwyn is then now king. He's now king. He's not ready for this responsibility, but now he's the only one who can be king of Krull. So he is then met up with this old man, this wise man called Ynir, played by Freddie Jones, who then tells him, in order for you to get your princess back, and in order for you to be able to stop the beast, because his whole plan is, I want to go and find the beast and save the princess and kill the beast and to get revenge for the death of my father. And he's not prepared. So the old man sends Colwyn to this cavern somewhere in the mountains to retrieve this mythic legendary weapon called the glaive. And the glaive is awesome. The glaive is one of my favorite movie weapons. I think it's a really cool, iconic design, and it's a really cool scene where he gets the glaive. He goes in, and the glaive is in some like lava, and it's like a test of faith. And he puts his hand into the lava and pulls out the glaive. And Ynir and Colwyn then go on their journey because they're going to try to find a seer who can locate where the Black Fortress is, because the Black Fortress changes locations. There's another thing that I liked about the movie is that this Black Fortress doesn't stay in one place. The fortress itself teleports, which is something I haven't really seen before in any movie, and I really haven't seen since. So along the way, he meets up with Urgo the Magnificent, played by David Battley, who's essentially the film's comic relief. He's a sorcerer who isn't really that great at what he does, and he thinks he's more powerful than he is type deal. And when he's trying to turn other people into certain things, but he ends up turning himself into whatever he's trying to do. Yeah, not what. No, I'll talk about that character later in more detail. And then he manages to get the services of Urgo, who comes along for the ride. And they also meet up with Alun Armstrong's character, Torquil, who's the leader of these bandits. And these bandits, there's a lot of these bandits are just throwaway characters. But you have one of them, Keegan, is played by Liam Neeson. Robbie Coltrane plays Rune. And Alun Armstrong is the leader of the bandits. And Ken Marshall's character, Colwyn, finds a way to get them to join with him to fight the beast, to find the Black Fortress, save the princess, and fight, and hopefully slay the beast. Along the way, they also come across this Cyclops called Rel, played by Bernard Bresslaw, and Rel is a Cyclops who is the last of his race. And originally his race was not, they weren't actually Cyclopses. and they made a deal with the Beast to, if they gave one of their eyes to the Beast, they would hopefully get the ability to see the future in return. But the Beast is such an asshole, the Beast is such a beast, that he lied to them. And he took away one of their eyes, and in return gave them the ability to only see their own death. So that's the only future they can see, is when they're going to die. And they also meet this old seer, the Emerald Sear, played by John Welsh, and his apprentice, Titch, played by Graham McGrath, who's like this little kid. And so they band together, and they go on these journeys. They go to these different places in order to try to find a seer who can find where the Black Fortress is, but the Beast gets to the seer before they can, with one of his changelings, and it takes the form of the seer and leaves the seer for dead. And but they eventually do find out what the changeling is. The changeling has taken the seer's place before all hell breaks loose. But a couple of the bandits, I think, die. One of them dies in the quicksand, and then they end up just heading out, trying to. They're lost now. They don't have a seer, because the seer was going to go to some place to contact some guy to be able to see where the Black Fortress is, but they don't have anybody to do that anymore. So then Ynir comes up with this plan where Ynir's like, okay, I know this woman named that I used to love in the past, called the Widow of the Web. And so he goes in to the widow to meet the Widow of the Web, and literally this web, this giant web that he has to walk across and try to avoid this stop motion spider, which is actually a really good effect. So he avoids the spider, gets to this girl, gets her to it's Widow of the Web, played by Francesca Annis. She gives him the information, tells him where the Black Fortress is, but it's one of those things where he gets this information at the cost of his life. So with his last dying breaths, he tells our heroes where the Black Fortress is, and so then they head off in that direction. And along the way, they commandeer these wild fire mares, which are these horses that can run extremely fast and can even gallop across thin air. And they head off to the Black Fortress. They arrive at the Black Fortress. They get inside. Colwyn uses the glaive to break through the prison where Princess Lyssa is being held. He fights off the Beast for the first time with the glaive. The glaive gets stuck in the Beast's chest, so he pretty much has to try to get out of the fortress, because it's starting to crumble and starting to break apart because the Beast was attacked and the Beast is hurt. And if the Beast is hurt, then apparently the whole fortress is structurally unsound. And so the Beast comes back, though, and Colwyn doesn't have his glaive. And of course, then you have the whole sort of thing where you've always had the power all along. Use the Force. Use the Force, Colwyn. But really what he does is he uses the kind of the power of love, the power of the union that he's made between himself and Lyssa, has given him these flame powers that would make Johnny Storm blush, so that he shoots the flame at the Beast. The Beast gets lit on fire, he gets burned to death, he's vanquished. Colwyn and the princess and all the our band of heroes, they escape. Except for the Cyclops, who sacrificed himself to save everybody. And they escape, get out of the Black Fortress just before it gets sucked up into outer space. And then they pretty much live happily ever after. It doesn't really set it up for a sequel bait ending. It has Colwyn and Lyssa are going to become king and queen of Krull. They've united the kingdoms. Torquil is going to be one of the heads of, like, the head of security, or the head of the police, sort of the military force for Krull. And yeah, and then the movie pretty much ends. Krull is a film that grew on me. The first time I saw it on like cable when I was a kid, when I was staying over with my dad, and I wasn't that impressed by it. I thought it was kind of lame. But over the years, I've revisited it time and time again, and this most recent time that I saw it, I really liked it. I thought it was a fun movie. I thought it was a good film. Now, Krull, if we're going to talk about the things that I like about the movie, real quick. For one, I love the production and art direction. It's lavish, it's lush. The actual sets that are built are just gorgeous. They're beautiful. I'm surprised this wasn't nominated for an Academy Award for Best Production Design. Maybe it wasn't, but maybe it was, but I don't know if it was or not. Um, the screenplay, I think, is there's a lot going on, but it's never confusing, so I think that's definitely a plus. The script by Stanford Sherman. The direction by Peter Yates, I think, is really good. He does a great job getting the most out of these sets and the most out of these visual effects sequences, the stop motion scenes with the spider and the Widow of the Web scene, and a lot of these other sequences in the film. It's a very effects orientated production, and Peter Yates did a good job, you know, shooting those effect sequences and not making them look cheap or ineffective. I like the cast. There's one actor that I'm meh on, but it's not really his performance that's the problem. It's the way that the character is written. I like Ken Marshall. I like Lysette Anthony. Freddie Jones, though, to me is definitely the one that stands out the most. I think he's really great in this as Yanir, the old one. He really gives this wise old man type of performance that really adds some respectability to the production. It makes it feel a little bit more, I know, respectable and not as silly. And this is something that could have easily been silly, considering, you have this glaive and you have this beast and stuff like that. But you have a character, an established actor, professionally trained actor, and Freddie Jones here, and delivering a really great performance that really, in a lot of ways, anchors the film because he narrates the film too. Bernard Bresslaw I liked as Rel, as the Cyclops. Alun Armstrong I thought it was effective as Torquil. Liam Neeson and Robbie Coltrane were good, but they didn't have much to do. They were just there pretty much. And the guy who acted as the Beast, I thought he in the suit did the best job that he could. Trevor Martin was a good did a good job voicing the Beast. It was very intimidating sounding, and it was a very creepy character, and Trevor Martin did a good job helping bring that character to life. Uh, and so, I mean, of course, the score. I love the score by James Horner. Like I mentioned earlier briefly, it is one of my favorite scores. Especially the piece "Ride of the Fire Mares," which is one of my favorite pieces of film music ever. It's epic. It's thrilling. It's just wide in scope. It's really, really wonderful. And it's definitely one of the late great James Horner's best scores. And it does get a lot of praise, and it definitely should, because it's a really, really wonderful score. It's robust and fits the film perfectly, and honestly raises the film to a whole nother level, because the score just makes all of these sequences in the movie all the more exciting and all the more thrilling because of James Horner's score. The bits of action that were there, I did enjoy. I did like, especially the few scenes that you did see with the glaive. It was really a lot of fun to see that weapon in action. And other than that, I mean, pretty much most of the film is a positive. Most of it is a pro. There's not really a lot of things that I thought didn't really work that well about this movie. But if I was going to talk about some things that I didn't particularly care for about Krull, I'd have to say it is a bit slow paced. I mean, especially when they're going into the swamp trying to find a seer, it kind of gets bogged down a little bit until the Slayers show up and there's a little action sequence. Um, it's 121 minutes, and it definitely does kind of feel like that. It feels pretty heavy. It gets kind of swampy at times, gets stuck in the muck, but then eventually gets out of it and picks up near the climax. Um, the tone of the film can kind of be a little bit all over the place. Like there can be moments where it'll be dark and serious, and then it'll be kind of goofy, especially with the scenes with David Battley's character Ergo the Magnificent. And I don't know, I just didn't like that character. I didn't find that character funny. I found it kind of annoying and kind of useless. So I could have done without that character. The performance was actually, character would have been okay if it was written differently, but this character is just kind of comic relief and kind of a goofball, and I just wasn't a fan of the character. I would have rather seen more of Rel than Ergo the Magnificent. It seemed like he was thrown in there to try to appeal to kids. And that's what I'm saying by the tone. Like sometimes it's like this dark and gritty, this tone, and then pretty violent too at times for a PG rated movie. And the Slayers themselves, when you shoot them, these creatures pop out of their heads and stuff. It's kind of gory. And then you have this kind of kitty character in Ergo the Magnificent. And then you even have a kid as well who's just kind of along for the ride. And speaking of that, there's a lot of characters. There's like a buttload of characters in this, and a lot of them are just cannon fodder and could have been cut out of the film. Like a lot of the bandits. Like I think I would have been fine. It would have been just as fine if you just had Alun Armstrong, Liam Neeson, and Robbie Coltrane, and none of these other characters, because they don't really do anything. I guess they have like certain things that they favor. Like one guy uses daggers and one guy has a net, but they really don't add anything to the film. Um, Another thing that I wanted to see more of was the glaive. The glaive is such an awesome weapon, and Colwyn barely uses it. I think some of these action sequences would have been really amped up and would have been more fun to watch and even more action-packed if Colwyn was using the glaive. In the movie, he doesn't use it until he gets into the fortress. He uses it to kill a few slayers and then uses it to break through the prison and save the princess. He throws it at the beast a few times. It gets stuck in the beast's chest, and he never uses it again. In fact, he doesn't even get it back. For all we know, the glaive got sucked up into outer space along with the Black Fortress. And that's not cool. The glaive is such an awesome, iconic weapon. It should not have been sucked into space with the Black Fortress. It should have been back with Colwyn. Colwyn should have like done this with his hands and used the force and got it to come back to him or something. I don't know. I mean, you could have used the glaive more. I would have rather appreciated him using the glaive again and then using the fire powers as well, throwing the glaive at the beast and then shooting him with the flame, throwing the glaive again and then shooting him with the flame instead of just using the flame and then leaving the glaive inside the beast. But you know, that's just me. That's just me personally. I just think the glaive could have been used more in the film. Um, but other than that, I mean, that's really all I can think of in terms of negatives for the movie. Because for the most part, I think it's a really epic, old-fashioned, really well put together, really well made fantasy film with some science fiction elements. It's one of the closest films I can think of that has really done an excellent job recreating the vibe and the feel of the fantasy novels from the 1980s that were popular around the time. So, if I were to rate this film, if I were to rate Krull out of 5 stars, I give the movie 4 out of 5. I think it's a really solid film. I think it's definitely one of the better science fiction fantasy films of the 1980s. Um, and I actually would highly recommend the film. I would recommend it to fans of sci-fi fantasy films like The Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, Willow. If you're a fan of those type of movies, I definitely recommend Krull. But sadly, the film didn't do that well when it came out. It cost about $47 million. That's not accounting the huge budget probably had for marketing. It had a making of TV special on TV. It had a Marvel Comics adaptation. It had multiple different video games. It had an arcade cabinet. It also had an Atari game. And it also had a pinball machine and a board game. And of course, a novelization as well by Alan Dean Foster. But none of this really led to the film being a huge hit. It made only $16 million in the box office. It was a huge disappointment for Columbia Pictures. They were thinking they had their next Star Wars, and that's not what happened at all. And it also got a lot of mixed reviews by critics. But the movie has gotten a cult following over the years, and I definitely do feel it deserves it. I think it's one of those films that deserves its cult following because it is a one of a kind sci-fi fantasy film. There is not another sci-fi fantasy film like Krull. It is unique in that regard. So, yeah. Thanks for watching, and stay out of trouble.